Hey everybody, it's your old pal John. I hope you're doing well. It's been some time. We have the guy that you love to hate, and I kind of like, but we'll see. 7 questions Americans ask about Britain and its people. All right, guys, Americans are not all that bright when it comes to the... Okay, Americans aren't always that bright. Let's just leave it there and move on.
Here are the most common questions that I receive from Americans about Britain.
Why do
The question I get
British
all the
say
time
math?
is why do British people say maths instead of math? And this is one of those questions that...
Wait, I think I know this. It's because it's short for mathematics. And so maths. Because, I mean, there are a bunch of different kinds of math. Which, actually, I'm kind of on the British side of this, so...
often gets asked in reverse as well. In other words, why do Americans say math instead of maths? And if you go on any kind of internet forum, as we used to say back in the past, you'll generally speaking have Americans defend their position and Brits defend their position, and nobody see the other side's argument. But the common reason that we give as to why we pluralize it is that it is short for mathematics, which itself describes various disciplines of maths. Now, in America, mathematics is obviously seen as a singular entity, just like English and science, even though all 3 of those subjects contain multiple disciplines. In science, you have chemistry, physics, biology. In English, you have English language and English literature and many other facets in between, which then makes me realize that neither country is consistent. After all, nobody in Britain would say, I have a degree in Englishes. On the other side of the coin, Americans might refer to sporting activities as sports to denote the fact that there is in fact more than one sport. In Britain, we don't usually have that final S, even though the argument for it being a countable noun is pretty strong. So I suppose in that regard, it's just like the rest of the English language. No one can really make up their mind what the rules are.
That's fair. There are, all right, rules aren't followed, but I'm going with the maths camp. Let me know what you guys think. I'm sticking with maths, plural. I think that's the right way to do it.
Speaking of language barriers, wouldn't it be nice if we had an app that helped you overcome...
Let me get rid of the infomercial here. Apparently there's a summer sale on something. So you know it's real time. And...
put an R in words that don't have one.
Why do Brits put an R into words that don't have one? What the hell are you talking about?
And at first I was really confused by this question because I couldn't think of an example of what they meant until somebody gave me an example. In the Beatles song, A Day in the Life, John Lennon says, I saw a film today, oh boy.
Yeah.
Now, most British people probably wouldn't find anything particularly unusual about the way it's pronounced. We don't even notice when he's singing it that he's pronouncing an R after the word saw. To Americans, it's apparently very noticeable when British people do this. And that is, of course, because the United States is a largely rhotic-speaking country. That is, most Americans will pronounce the R in words like door. So in American English, it's very important to differentiate between those words that do have R's in them and those that don't. If it were the Beach Boys singing A Day in the Life, it would most likely go like this. I saw a film today, oh boy.
What is that? Sounds like Kermit the Frog decided to sing the Beatles. Don't do that again. Please don't sing again.
They would probably sound less like Kermit the Frog. Notice when I do that, there's no R sound. So why do we do it in Britain? Well,
first of all, not all Americans sound like Kermit the Frog. I don't think... Are there any Americans that sound like Kermit the Frog? Let me know if you think that's the truth, if you think that way.
This is known as an intrusive R, and there's an intrusive cat. That is, when you have a word that ends in a vowel sound, like saw, that's followed by a word that begins with a vowel sound, like A. And so our brains feel compelled to stick an R in between the 2 words, so that the transition from one to the other feels a bit more fluid. And the best part is we don't even realize we're doing it.
It doesn't feel that way to me. I saw a film today. Why do British people drink warm beer?
Now, of course, I get questions on a range of topics, and it's not just limited to words. One question that I get asked all the time is, do British people like warm beer? And the first time I was asked this question actually predates my YouTube channel because it was asked to me by a family member of my wife's. And I was quite...
All right, I gotta say, so my understanding is that you guys, that in the UK, I think it would be the UK, you guys didn't necessarily have refrigeration. Like, no, I'm not saying like you're the only place that doesn't have refrigeration, but it didn't come as quickly as it did in the States. So I guess I would think it would be like a historical and logistics kind of thing, and also just time passing thing. Well, let's see.
Puzzled by this because I've never really thought of British beer as warm. I've also never thought of it as British. Now, there will be instances, of course, when we buy, say, a 6-pack and there's no room in our fridges because they're tiny, so we leave them on a counter or a cupboard. And of course, famously, we don't have air conditioning in Britain, so beer can, in those circumstances, get as warm as the rest of the house. But when you're talking about visiting British pubs, some of which also don't have air conditioning, to my memory, the beer was often cold and refreshing and usually mediocre. When it comes to temperature, I wouldn't say that I've noticed a discernible difference between beer that's served in America and beer that's served in Britain. So I'm not really sure where it comes from, but it is a stereotype that's labelled at the British. I'm also not a beer connoisseur, so I could just be talking out of my arse.
So I also understand that American beer sucks. I don't drink a lot of beer. I drink it, like if I have a beer, it's these days it's just like a non-alcoholic beer, to be quite honest with you, just because they're not that bad. But you know, if you have any American beer, it better be cold because a lot of times they suck. What's the difference?
As somebody who has in the past been accused of using the terms England, Britain, and the UK interchangeably, I should probably point out that I do know the difference between the three, while conceding that it probably is quite confusing for people not from there. Basically, Britain is one island with multiple mini islands all around it. And this consists of 3 countries that all get along in perfect harmony. Scotland, Wales, and England. But the 3 of them, known collectively as Great Britain, also formed a unity with Northern Ireland. And so that became the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
The British
so you might be asking, well, what about the rest of Ireland? We don't own them, so they're not part of this. Though technically the island that makes up Britain and the island that makes up Ireland is all part of the British Isles. It's so confusing.
It's not really that confusing.
Abbreviated answer answers the question that you needed answers to.
It's basic if you know world history, or if you actually take the time to figure it out, or just learn about it. But people who don't learn about it, they're like, oh, we went to England, we went to, here. I don't know. Americans are funky that way.
Inevitably, when you have 2 countries that are in fact separated by a large ocean, a lot of the memos that get lost in the pond pertain to food. And a question that comes up all the time is, how exactly do Brits define the word pudding? I had to think about this.
It's a good question. I've heard of Yorkshire pudding, and I don't think... When we think of pudding, we think of something with sugar in it. So... And it's consistent in terms of... the way it's structured. I don't know what the word is.
Question when I was first asked it, because I'd never really imagined that we have different definitions for this word, and then I thought about it for a few seconds and realized, well, of course we do. In America, it turns out that a pudding is a very specific type of dessert that has sort of the consistency of custard, but isn't necessarily custard. This is weird to the British, although perhaps not as weird as our own definitions, because in England and or Britain and or the United Kingdom, pudding is a synonym for dessert, so that custardy thing would also be referred to as a pudding in Britain, but then so would chocolate cake and apple pie and ice cream. And you might think, well, what's weird about that? It seems pretty straightforward to me. Yeah, well, we also use pudding to describe specific savoury dishes. In fact, it turns out that it was in such a vein that the word pudding originated. From the 13th century, it originally meant a kind of sausage, the stomach or one of the entrails of a pig, sheep, etc., stuffed with mincemeat, blood and seasoning, boiled and kept till needed. This is why, to this very day, Brits and people from that other country, Ireland, refer to a type of blood sausage as black pudding. And
to be fair, the Native Americans do that. They what do they have? Like, it's like a blood soup in a way, but yeah, they do make blood sausage. A lot of Americans would be like, oh, that's disgusting. I don't know. I've had it. I don't think it's bad at all. I think it's great. Made correctly, just like everything else.
UK, this savoury definition extends beyond the context of blood sausage, because you also have Yorkshire pudding, which is similar to what Americans know as popovers.
Okay.
And of course, I couldn't really make this video without addressing a British institution in which some Americans have a surprisingly large interest, the royal family.
It is very interesting that we take an interest in the royal family. We don't have a stake in it, although we do have, what is it, Prince Henry? Harry? I don't know. Whatever. He's here. I don't know. It's just interesting. It's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. You guys have some weird tabloid thing with them. It's like your version of our Hollywood, I guess.
And perhaps the biggest question that I get around the royals is, does the king actually have any real power over his subjects? Subjects is their word, not mine. Because in Britain, I don't think we'd ever refer to ourselves as subjects, and certainly wouldn't view ourselves in that way. And that's largely because
But is
the
it
king
true?
doesn't really have any power over us. He just tours the country in a robe.
What?
They no longer have much say over the affairs of Britain. That's you.
But is it true or not true that you're still subjects of the king, or is it of the monarchy? I don't know.
Usually done at the political level, over which King Charles has to give his nod and approval. Yes, you can call an election right now, Rishi. Not that I was ever going to say no. Basically, a word that gets used commonly about the monarch is that they are just ceremonial in nature. At this point, I think they're just there because nobody can imagine them not being there.
So I got some flack in a video because I kind of thought that, and I still, you really have to convince me otherwise, and hopefully not in a condescending way. That, I don't know, it sort of feels like having a longer serving person, like a monarch that doesn't have any real power, but that person is sort of the stability a country looks for. If you look at like the states and stuff, back and forth every 4 years, I mean, it's a nightmare. But kind of having just one person in that role, as long as they're not like a complete asshole, I don't know, it gives that certain stability to it. I think so, at least.
You've got all of those British people that do love and adore the British royal family and turn out for the parades and things like that. And then you've got people who can't stand them. And neither party wins, because this group, the group that really likes the royal family, inevitably ends up with way too many royal plate sets. And this group hasn't been able to affect the change they'd like to see, which is the complete removal of the royal family. And so in that respect, I suppose we are subjects. Not to be confused with maths.
Why do the British people like to, what was that, hate Americans? Oh, it's probably because it's so easy, and I think a lot of Americans, they always say like we're the greatest country in the world. I would like them to put a time stamp as to what year we were actually the greatest country. I think they're trying to talk about, I think they're referring to projection because, I mean, there's either been slavery, some form of not slavery, which is actually slavery, kind of, and then in 1950s that was a race. I mean, there's still stuff going on today. I mean, look at what we're doing with immigration. I mean, tell me when America really was great. And I'm not trying to be condescending towards my country, because there are really things that I really do like about our country, but it never really was great. It was either always great for a certain kind of person or, just not. It's always in flux. And it's good for some people, not good for others. And it constantly changes. I don't know when it was great.
Finally, this sentiment seems to be everywhere that I look.
The only thing I can tell you about it is that it was great in like 5 days after when the Civil War ended up until Lincoln was shot, because then it was really on the path of being probably truly equal. That's probably the best time, which is really weird to say, but if you look back in history, I'll shut up now.
Online, including my DMs and comment sections, and that is, why do British people dislike Americans? And I'll tell you something, the answer to that is really complicated. Firstly, for the large part, I don't think it's even true. You have to consider that us Brits love to moan. And I mean about anything.
So
it could be the
though.
weather. It could be our local MP, Member of Parliament. It could be that the bus timetable has changed for the 4th time this month. Now, when this happens on social media, where the mood and the motivation of the person speaking is not entirely clear, I could see how a sentence like, oh, bloody Americans calling it soccer again, might seem like it's an attack. But something else that you should keep in mind in Britain is we attack our best friends. Chainsaw Jim is not just my mate, he's an arsehole. He really is an arsehole, and he's not my friend. Don't take these things personally, and Brits, do some fact-checking first. There's often a historic explanation that says the thing for which you are attacking them was in fact the original work of the British. Anyone who's been following my channel
Soccer.
for a long time will know multiple examples, whether that is the British origination of soccer itself, or the word fall to mean autumn. If I've learned anything from this video, it's that I get a lot of questions, so thanks for those. And I couldn't possibly have made this video without thinking ahead to part 2, in which I will look at 7 questions that British people ask me about America. And
Ooh. All right, guys. What do you think about that? I think it's to be made fun of is I don't have a problem with it. I mean, anyone who puts yourself out there, gotta have some thick skin. Let me know what you guys think. Is he right? Is he wrong? Am I right? Am I wrong? Who knows? I'll see you in the next one. Bye.